The Fellowship of the Ring chapters, 2 chapters this time. Chapters 6 and 7. So chapter 6 is the Old Forest and chapter 7 is then followed by Old Tom Bombadil? In the House of Tom Bombadil. Okay. I'm doing 2 chapters at once because the Old Forest chapter was literally the hobbits walking through a forest. The Tom Bombadil chapter was much more interesting to read, but let's just start at the beginning because I probably have like 1,000 little things I wanted to talk about as usual. Shout out to Fatty Bulger, true hero of the story. The descriptions that Tolkien writes in all of these Shire chapters are just so beautiful, especially he likes to describe things at dusk and dawn, and he always likes to focus in on like mist and dew, and it's beautiful and I love it. I'm not complaining. The leaves of trees were glistening and every twig was dripping. The grass was grey with cold dew. Everything was still and faraway noises seemed near and clear. Fowls chattering in the yard, someone closing a door of a distant house. When it's a very still day, then I suppose sound is travelling further and not getting lost on the wind. And it is these descriptions that makes me really excited because I have finally booked a trip to go to the UK and Scotland. Well, mainly North England and Scotland with my mum. So I'm super excited to actually get up and do lots of walks. If anyone has any recommendations for like walking trails, beautiful places to go because they are beautiful, please let me know. Also, cemeteries, specifically gravestones of famous people. I love visiting them. Do we know where Tolkien lived? I mean, it seems to me that Tolkien must have done lots of just in general nature exploration or walks in the early morning or dusk, because he often talks about it, and I do think that is a reflection, or at least like I truly think he's the sort of person that would have sat on some kind of wicker chair on the veranda and just really deeply thought about what he was looking at in nature, including the stars and the moon and how the moonlight would shine in different ways based on different weather patterns in different clouds, because this is what you read a lot of. And I'm not complaining, it's great. I thought all the trees were whispering to each other, passing news and plots along in an unintelligible language, and the branches swayed and groped without any wind. That is something out of a horror story, but I suppose now that we know that some Ents are friendly, it's not so horrific. But now that I've read this chapter, I think that the trees in this forest are... Okay, it is called the Old Forest, I understand, but is this like potentially the oldest forest in Arda? Is that a yes? We have no evidence otherwise, and it kind of makes sense that it does, especially when we get to Tom talking about the Old Willow, the Old Forest, the oldest forest. I kind of like the idea that this could be like the oldest place where trees were, where the first Ents were that Yavanna made. I actually really like it how Yavanna made walking trees and then alll attempted to make, he made the dwarves. And these two Valar were married to each other, and they're the only two that kind of tried to create a walking, talking creature, and actually both successfully created a walking, talking creature with a soul. Although it's interesting, sorry, this is a massive aside, that Ilúvatar intervened and said, well, how are you going to bring the dwarves to life without the secret fire? And then, you know, then sparks a fire within the 7 dwarf original OG lords. But with the Ents, that wasn't required, so they don't have souls. The Ents don't have souls. This is, anyway, the conclusion I'm coming to. I don't understand Merry. Like, he seems like he just is quite... like he's aware of the Old Forest and has come into it a few times. Like, okay, Merry. Something makes paths, Merry says. Whenever one comes inside, one finds open tracks, but they seem to shift and change from time to time in a queer fashion. I was wondering about that a lot because there are, as the hobbits are walking through the forest, you do actually get a lot of like, and then the path opened up or the path veered this way. And you're like, if no one's walking through the forest, who's making these little desire paths or paths of desire? Is that what they're called? It seems like it is Tom Bombadil and, what do they call her? The river water daughter? Goldberry, daughter of the river. Like going into the forest, Merry is like cheerful. Merry alone seemed fairly cheerful. Merry, are you okay? I mean, he's just not afraid. I just don't know why. And so anyway, they struggle to get through the forest. This is important. And then suddenly they found a path and it seems like the forest had relented and was going to let them pass unhindered after all. So in the peak of their like overconfidence, Frodo starts singing a song about how all forests end and fail. And though dark they stand, all woods there must end at last. For east or west, all woods must fail. So he starts like singing a song in the middle of like a living, breathing forest that has some kind of extra consciousness, and starts talking about how, well, you know, you're just a forest, like you have an ending and then goodbye forest. And Merry's like, yeah, can you just like not sing anymore at present? Wait until we get to the edge and then we'll like sing it then. But like, Frodo, my man. I'm assuming that what happens after that, because the forest is like a little bit pissed off and the Willow gets drift of this. As my theory is that the Willow learns a lot of what's going on in the forest and beyond through like maybe a root network potentially that expands even beyond the old forest. And then my theory above that is that Tom Bombadil, he knows a lot because he's obviously been around since, what did he say? We'll get to that, but before, definitely before the moon was in the sky, before the elves had awoken, before there was an acorn. He saw the first acorn, which kind of suggested he was there before any trees as well, if we were to take acorn as like representative of all trees. So I think Tom also has a way to communicate or commune with the trees, and so also kind of knows a lot of the goings on of the world through that network, which is how we knew so much about the hobbits. Regarding Merry, he spoke cheerfully, and if he felt any great anxiety, he did not show it. The others did not answer. They were depressed. So this is Merry, like being merry and like stable and, you know, just saying don't sing that song, but also don't be depressed about it. And all the other three are just like super depressed, dragging their feet, and he's just like, go Merry, I love you. They find a little like opening, clearing with a hill in the middle of it, which I think is the hill where previously hobbits had burned a bunch of the old forest, which honestly is like a very bold move. I have respect for that. But they couldn't see much. In the west, they could not make either the line of the hedge or the valley of the Brandywine. Northward, where they looked most hopefully, they could see nothing that might even be a suggestion of the East Road. And yeah, like the horizon was just murky and veiled in all directions. So another thing that could be making the path could be baby trees, because like I like the idea that baby trees haven't yet put down their roots solidly, and they're kind of still like walking around trying to find where they want to permanently make a home. And so at night they come out and just like wander around looking for like their spot for life. That is a wildly untrue theory, but I like it. So yeah, they're kind of now getting forced to go in the direction of the, what's that river called? It goes through the old forest. The River Withy Windle. Here's another beautiful description. A golden afternoon of late sunshine lay warm and drowsy upon the hidden land between. The air was thick with them, fluttering yellow from the branches, for there was a warm and gentle breeze blowing softly in the valley, and the reeds were rustling, and the willow boughs were creaking. Willows upon a river must be something that Tolkien has seen. I'm struggling to imagine what that looks like. You know, in like the previous chapters, we often get right at the end of a chapter a description of Frodo being so tired or the hobbits being so tired and then them falling asleep. Like often the chapters end on the hobbits sleeping, and it's no difference in this chapter and the next. Frodo's so sleepy. Okay, this is a forced sleepiness though, because sleepiness seemed to be creeping out of the ground and up their legs and falling softly out of the air upon their heads and eyes. My gosh, that line alone just makes you sleepy, because that is actually how sleepiness feels like. It's just like everywhere and you're like, my eyelids. You know, that like postprandial like 2 p.m. on a summer's day, and you're just like 1 minute super like alert and the next minute you're like, I think I could sleep for 5 years. Only a gentle noise on the edge of hearing, a soft fluttering as of a song half whispered, seemed to stir in the boughs above. Just that heavy silence feeling. I could totally feel that when I was reading this. It's just like a random moment where like Frodo in his sleepiness is just like, wait Sam, I must bathe feet a minute. He's so tired he can't use his grammar. He's like, I need to bathe my feet. He's like, must bathe feet a minute. Why he was bathing his feet, I don't know. But that's funny alone, but also the fact that he could not even use grammar correctly. Not that I use grammar very well. It's like I get that, Frodo. In the best of times, I also struggle with grammar. Hobbits go to sleep. Frodo, no. He like saved his constitution throw. And then Tom Bombadil arrives. So Tom is wearing, and I know this from reading, so he has a hat with a blue feather, a blue coat, green stockings and yellow boots. And he is red-faced and neither the height of a man or a dwarf or something, but it's like something in between. Was this like Eru Iluvatar's very first experiment with like, what should the children look like? Made Tom and was like, not quite, we'll try again. Just kind of left him. Anyway, his description is crazy, but I do appreciate the fact that he's carrying on a large leaf as on a tray a small pile of white water lilies. I love him for that. And then the first thing he's just like, are you in trouble? Tell me. Oh, but don't crush my lilies. Like, the context is just like, please tell me the context. We do find out the context. He was getting them for Goldberry, but still. The way that he speaks and also the songs that he sings reminds me a lot of the music that was put to these songs from The Rings of Power by Bear McCreary. Sung by various people. There's lots of different versions, and I actually really, really like the tune. I'm going to link below some songs that I actually really like because I've had them in my head the entire time. In the past week reading these 2 chapters, every time Tom speaks, that tune pops into my head. And I really like it. It's not the tune you would expect. It's really relaxing and I like it. In fact, I like a lot of the music from Rings of Power. It's the best thing about Rings of Power. And I liked Bear McCreary's stuff anyway from previous things that he has made. But, so the hobbits get to Tom Bombadil's house and they kind of walk in feeling like dirty and awkward, like folk that knocking at a cottage door to beg for a drink of water have been answered by a fair young elf queen clad in living flowers. Yeah, I feel that. That would be really weird. What a weird feeling. It's unclear exactly what Goldberry is. I actually initially thought just a woman, a human woman, then elf, but I have a feeling potentially she's something other, maybe Maya of some sort. Don't know. She could be an elf. It's just a really unusual spot for an elf to be. Oh, springtime and summertime and spring again after. Oh, wind on the waterfall and leaves laughter. That is one of the tunes that Tom sings. And I will say that spring again after, rhyming with leaves laughter, is some of the best. It's like, it's such a good way to rhyme a poem because it rhymes, but also the things that are rhyming are like thematically intimate with each other and just work really well together. Like they're thinking of them together makes both of them greater than the sum of their parts, if that makes sense. Like, you could have had other rhymes that would work, but putting spring again after with leaves laughter it's like rhyming both by sound and by like heart and vibe. Anyway, I love it. That's my favorite, honestly, like favorite little rhyme I think that I've come across so far, and maybe my favorite entirely. There's a line here that says, Tom has no fear, Tom Bombadil is master. I initially had a thought that maybe the trick to getting through the old forest is to have no fear, but I actually think it's more than that. But that was like my original theory. I think you also just have to be like feared, and I think that the forest to a point probably fears and respects Tom Bombadil and kind of just leaves him alone, whereas with the hobbits they weren't really doing that. He had now no hat and his thick brown hair was crowned with autumn leaves. Okay. I love it how leaves are autumn leaves, but they could also be spring leaves or like winter leaves or summer leaves. I just love it how the leaves are like, what are you? I'm an autumn leaf. But wait a minute, all leaves talking to each other have to be of the same season, because otherwise they are existing in different times. And we do not have time traveling leaves. So all leaves in autumn are autumn leaves. Unless, like, I don't know, there could be a spring leaf starting to flower really early in winter. I don't know. But there are 6 seasons, I believe. I made a whole thing for like D&D as to like the months, and like made up like a bunch of celebrations that could be in each month, as well as the seasons. So I think it was winter, stirring, spring, summer, autumn, fading, and then back to winter. In fact, on that note, I've been meaning to, if you have in the Lost Road, someone told me this, one of the amazing commenters, I can't remember who, but thank you. In the back of the Lost Road is a whole section on etymology. One of the most valuable sections of the history of Middle-earth, and I have discovered my favorite word ever in this language is narquelion. Oh, it's a Quenya word? Fire fading, narquelion. So na meaning like flame or fire, which is also known as autumn. So there's a word for autumn which is translated as fire fading. And I think that honestly, that is the most beautiful, evocative description of autumn. And I think we know that Tolkien loves autumn, but fire fading, like the fading of summer, but also like, it could also mean the fact that the leaves go, you know, beautiful reds and oranges and browns, and then eventually start fading and dropping too. Like, it's just so many beautiful pictures that come to mind when we think of fire fading. Imagine if we just had like winter, spring, summer, and fire fading. Like, can we have that? I know a lot of Americans call autumn fall, and I actually also like fall because that too is quite evocative, but fire fading, way cooler. Sorry, there are 2 different autumns as there are 2 different springs. There's true autumn and true spring, and then stirring and fading. Also just the symmetry on that, so good. Or Narbeleth. Firith or Narbeleth are the Sindarin names for fading or leaf fall. One day, a day will pass where I don't go onto elfdict.com. That is not this day. Yeah, Narbeleth also is sun fading or sun waning. I do not know why I'm obsessed about that. Let's get back to the book. Tom is got, so there's yellow cream and honeycomb and white bread and butter, milk, cheese and green herbs and ripe berries all gathered. Tom basically walks in while the hobbits are talking to Goldberry with these autumn leaves on his hair. Oh, that's right. That's how we got onto this entire detour. And essentially he's like, hey, is dinner ready yet? They like have, for the hobbits, a room for them with wide earthenware basins. I wanna have a bath in an earthenware basin. It just sounds so homely. And beside it stood brown ewers filled with water. Ewers is like the bane of my existence because it's such a common crossword clue and I always forget it. There were soft green slippers set ready beside each bed. This is like the best Airbnb. I want to go there. Anyway, so they have their meal. The hobbits ate only as famished hobbits can eat. They drink in their drinking bowls seemed to be clear cold water, yet it went to their hearts like wine and set free their voices. Enchanted water that makes you feel happy. So great. I really like how Goldberry was like, heed no nightly noises, for nothing passes door and window here, save moonlight and starlight and the wind off the hilltop. That's just so beautiful. Like, imagine like having a guest over for dinner, and then as you're, you know, showing them to their room, giving them towels and soap, whatever, you're just like, have no fear. Nothing passes these windows except the beautiful sound of the rustling wind on the trees outside. I swear the next guest I have to stay at my house is going to hear me say something like that. Sleep gathered on their eyelids. Again, we have hobbits being sleepy. So Tom says a couple of things that I find very interesting, and the first thing is, because he's talking to Frodo, is Frodo's like, did you hear me yelling for help, or did you stumble across me by chance? And Tom says, just chance brought me, if chance you call it. And I really like that. It's kind of like, it's true that Tom wasn't actively looking for Frodo and the hobbits, but he also would say that doesn't mean it's chance. So he is a strong believer, clearly, of fate. Or no, take that back. It's more like, I think he questions the idea of chance. I think you can question chance and coincidence and then not necessarily believe that everything that happened was because it was fated to be. I can't remember if I've talked about it with this book, or like it was a conversation I was having with a friend recently about how some aspects in your life are weighted more heavily with fate than others. Just chance brought me them, if chance you call it. Tom is not calling Frodo out, but it's kind of just questioning like, well, just because I wasn't looking for you doesn't mean that it was chance that I stumbled across you. He also says, when Frodo is asking about the Willow Man, or it's called the Willow Man, not the Old Willow Tree. Is that what it is? Old Grey Willow Man is what his name is. And Merry and Pippin are just like, can we not talk about that right now? And Tom agrees. He says, now is the time for resting. Some things are ill to hear when the world's in shadow. And I really love that too, because it's like, he's not saying it because he doesn't want to tell a ghost story at night, and like, you know, watching scary stories at night is way worse than during the day. But he is kind of suggesting that there is a power in darkness that exists in this world, well, in the Middle Earth. In this world, things do move in the shadows that can't move in daylight. So they might be listening in closer or have more power, and it's best to talk about bad things where they cannot see or hear, which is going to be broad daylight, and I really love that. Anyway, 2 great lines from Tom. The hobbits sleep, we get them dreaming of different things, and then Sam is the one who doesn't dream. Sam slept through the night in deep content, if logs are contented. It's a really funny line. Thanks for that little philosophical question there, Tolkien. I will put it on the debating list. Are logs contented? So yeah, this great willow, who is possibly one of the first trees ever. None were more dangerous than the great willow. His heart was rotten, but his strength was green, and he was cunning and a master of winds, and his song and thought ran through the woods on both sides of the river. His grey, thirsty spirit drew power out of the earth and spread like fine root threads in the ground and invisible twig fingers in the air, till it had under its dominion nearly all trees in the forest from the hedge to the downs. And I do think beyond that, like, it was controlling everything in the old forest, but I think it also would have been getting a lot of information and have some kind of influence even beyond that. I feel sorry for those hedges who like hedge between the Shire and the old forest. They're just like, we have the worst job right now. Anyway, whether Old Man Willow, the Great Willow, is the oldest tree or like Something along those lines. It's really interesting that his heart is rotten. Like, what happened there? I don't even know if we actually have the lore for that, but it's interesting. Is it because Yavanna left him and never really came back? I don't know. We have a great little lore drop description here from Tom, who was basically telling stories to the hobbits all day as it was raining. He's talking about the Great Barrows. I think the Great Barrows he means is encompassing like Barrow Downs? Barrows are what? A cemetery? Is that what it is? A barrow is a two-wheeled hand. A barrow is also an ancient burial mound. Or a male pig castrated before maturity. Wow, okay. The variation in the meaning of the word barrow is great. Anyway, the Great Barrows, the stone rings upon the hills and in the hollows among the hills. What do you mean by stone rings? I love this little lore drop here. Green walls and white walls rose. There were fortresses on the heights. Kings of little kingdoms fought together. Little kingdoms. And the young sun shone like fire on the red metal of their new and greedy swords. Young sun? Well, the sun was young, like in the first age. But it kind of seems like they're alluding to third age history here. Absolutely love the red metal of their new and greedy swords. It's just so great. There was victory and defeat, and towers fell, fortresses were burned, and flames went up into the sky. I'm assuming this is the history of the fall of one of the three branch kingdoms of Arnor, Rhudaur, Cardolan. Then we get, a shadow came out of dark places far away, and the bones were stirred in the mounds. Barrow wights walked in the hollow places with a clink of gold rings, of rings on cold fingers, and gold chains in the wind. Stone rings grinned out of the ground like broken teeth in the moonlight. Still don't know what they mean by stone rings. So, the war with the Witch King was happening. A lot of mini lordlings of men died, were buried in the Great Barrows, which is now Barrow Downs. This is, by the way, I'm just speculating here and trying to figure this out as I'm filming. And for a while, sheep walked, biting the grass, but soon the hills were empty again. So soon darkness came back to these men who had all been buried with all of their jewelry on. It's like, how do you know the difference between a skeleton that was rich in their life or a skeleton that was not rich? Well, they'll be clinking. The ones that are noble will be clinking when they walk towards you because of skeleton on metal and all their rings. I guess the question is, if sheep were grazing the pastures over the Barrow Downs, Great Barrows, and now they're no longer, why the change, right? And since when was that change? Like, are we talking 10 years, 100 years? Since Bilbo left the Shire and brought the ring back. And then we get like Tom clearly talking about really old stuff. So this is a suggestion of how old he is, because the next minute the hobbits are thinking about times when the world was wider and the seas flowed straight into the western shore. When the world was wider, so before the world was round, when it was just flat, because that technically would make it wider. And when the seas flowed straight into the western shore. So when you could get on a ship and go to the western shore, the seas would take you straight there, essentially, which no longer happens. And the hobbits listen, and how many days had passed, Frodo could not tell. He did not feel either hungry or tired, only filled with wonder. Imagine that, being like satiated on wonder alone and never having to eat. Sounds like a good life. Tom also then talks about, he says, he knew the dark under the stars when it was fearless, before the Dark Lord came from outside. He knew the dark under the stars when it was fearless, when the darkness wasn't fearful. So this is before Melkor came and started like preying upon the elves very, very early on, I'm assuming. well before the second fight between the Valar. Outside is capitalized. I think they mean outside of like from the void. Oh yeah, and I was going to mention this before. Apparently Tom also has gotten information from Gildor and Farmer Maggot, and he doesn't actually specifically say that he has spoken to either of them. There's like a line here that says it was also clear that Tom had dealings with the elves, and it seemed that in some fashion news had reached him from Gildor concerning the flight of Frodo. I'm kind of just thinking, once again, Tom kind of knows this through his network of being able to communicate through the forest as well, or through like nature itself, and hasn't actually had direct contact with the elves or direct contact with Farmer Maggot, but at least learns of things from nature indirectly. Then we have a really weird moment where I think, is this the first time Frodo puts the ring on? Frodo puts the ring on! Like, for starters, he hands it over to Tom without thought, which is unusual. It's like crazy that, because he's not possessive about it, whereas he's possessive every other time. It's like the power of the ring didn't exist in the presence of Tom Bombadil, because A, Frodo hands it over without any misgivings. B, Tom puts it on and nothing happens. C, Frodo puts it on and nothing happens. Like, well, he disappears, but there's no description of like badness or darkness or a bad feeling settling upon Frodo from doing that. And Tom doesn't really kind of get so annoyed at him. He's just like, come on, we can see you, take it off. But like, I don't know, he's got some, he neutralizes magic. Neutralizes something. It's a very unusual moment here, because Gandalf very specifically told Frodo not to put it on. And Frodo just puts it on for fun. Wow. And it wasn't even like it was calling to be put on in this moment. It honestly just seems like around Tom, the ring is just a piece of metal. I quite like that idea. Anyway, the hobbits leave. Tom says, don't go to the Barrow Downs. Of course, the next chapter is called Fog on the Barrow Downs. Fog again. Anyway, yeah, so I feel like, I think when you read a lot about Tolkien stuff, Tom Bombadil comes up a lot. And I can see why it wasn't, he kind of got excluded from the movies, because the movies had a much darker tone in many ways. It got darker more quickly. And suddenly to have Tom pop out, I think could be quite jarring to a lot of viewers who are not used to like this style. I don't know. If they ever did remake Lord of the Rings, it would be so great to have not a detail missed and just have like everything in it. Honestly, I do think that in like my lifetime that will happen. I mean, they're already remaking Harry Potter. And it has been, what, 20 plus years since Lord of the Rings came out? Well over 20, like 25 plus years since it was in the process of being filmed. I do think that we will get another series, and I do wonder if that's the case, if they will include so much more of the book. We'll see. Anyway, I will see you for the next chapter, which is the Barrow Downs chapter, and I'm not gonna lie, I am excited for this chapter because my inner goth is like, yes, let's have skeletons rise out of the ground. I will see you then.